Hi, I'm Peter Antonovich. By now you've already met with me or somebody else in my office to discuss your hearing. This video is to give you some more details on how you are to prepare for this hearing and what you can expect to happen at the hearing. The hearing takes place in an office. It's not in a courtroom. There's no gallery of people behind you watching what you say. It'll just be you and me or somebody from my office and the judge, who more than likely will be on a video, so he'll be on a TV set or a computer monitor, although the judge could be there in person, and it could be a female, as though I said he, and an assistant to the judge. It's a very informal proceeding. It shouldn't take more than an hour. Typically it can be less than that. Occasionally it is more than that, but that's unusual. When you testify at this hearing, there are some rules I need you to follow. But before we get to the hearing, there are some things you need to do to prepare. In order to properly testify at this hearing, you have to be prepared to be an expert on your disability. The record is filled with records from your doctors, reports, indicating what the doctor feels your medical condition is, and maybe even indicating what he feels your symptoms and limitations are. Your doctors are experts in medicine. They're experts in the human body. They didn't become experts in the human body by living in one. They had to study it. I need you to be an expert on your disability at this hearing. You can't be an expert on your disability just by living with it. You have to study it. You have to pay attention to how your disability affects the way you get out of bed in the morning, the way you fix a meal, the way you get dressed, the way you do any of the other things you do ordinarily in the day. So you have to pay attention to all of these things. And between now and the hearing, I would like you to take notes every day if possible about what you've been paying attention to. Because taking notes gives you practice putting into words what you've been experiencing. And the hearing is all about you putting into words what you experience. If you don't practice choosing the words you would use, you'll be less comfortable at the hearing, you'll get nervous, your testimony will be incomplete. You'll also use more vague expressions such as sometimes or not much. Sometimes I don't get dressed in the morning. Sometimes my pain is so bad. Sometimes my pain travels down my leg. Sometimes is an awful word to use when you're testifying because nobody knows what sometimes is. Nobody knows what not much is. Nobody knows what very little is. How much can you lift very little? I don't know what that is. We need to be precise. You need to practice being precise. You need to be able to tell us precisely what you go through to get dressed in the morning. If it's a physical problem that you're experiencing, you may have difficulty bending over to pull up your socks or tie your shoes. You have to lay on the bed to hike up your trousers. If it's a psychological problem, you may be so depressed or lethargic or lacking in energy that there are 4 or 5 days of the week you don't bother getting dressed because you don't have the energy or the stamina to do it. You need to be able to explain these things. Those are symptoms. They are not flaws on your part. And you need to be able to express those symptoms in a way that the judge knows how profoundly they impact what you tried to do during the day. So, if I had my way when you testified, you'd avoid using vague expressions like sometimes and not much and very little. Or really bad, for example. If you're describing your pain, try not to say it's really bad or it's severe. You can say it, but tell us what that means to you. Because I can tell you I don't have probably the problems that you experience, but I have days when I would say I have severe pain. But my severe pain is probably nothing compared to yours. You wouldn't characterize my pain as severe. So try to use a description. It's like a knife stabbing me. It's like a hot poker. It's like being put in a vice and pressed. Any description, sharp, stabbing, burning, achy, throbbing, any description that will bring the picture clearer to the judge. Okay? And these are descriptions, of course, you should be using with your doctors as well when you describe your condition so that the doctor has a better idea as to what's going on. So work on taking notes every day. Pay attention to how your symptoms impact your ability to do things. And work on coming up with a very detailed description of what it is that those symptoms do to cause you limitations. Your job at the hearing is to report information. It's not necessarily to answer questions, okay? If you get hung up on answering questions, you'll think you'll have accomplished something as long as you answer every question asked of you. It's not that way, okay? Answering the questions is not the goal. The goal is reporting information. Questions is more like the tool you use to get to that goal. If I had a flat tire, my goal would be to change the flat tire. But in order to do so, I'd have to use a wrench. In order to get the information from you, we need to use questions. It's more the tool, but it's not the object of the whole proceeding. The proceeding is to get you to report accurately what you've been going through so the judge has a better idea as to what it is to live in your skin, to deal with the symptoms and difficulties that you're suffering from. So, try very hard to report things as accurately as possible. If you were to pick up a newspaper, let's say there was a fire in your neighborhood and you wanted to read about the fire, you wouldn't want to read an article that said, yesterday there was a fire somewhere on Main Street and there was a lot of damage done and the fire department eventually put it out. That wouldn't be a very good report. You'd want it to read at 7:15 p.m. yesterday at 2487 Main Street there was a 5-alarm fire to which 3 battalions of the fire department arrived. It took them 2 hours and 47 minutes to put the fire out. There was $180,000 worth of damage to the building. One person suffered smoke inhalation and is in the hospital. Everybody else escaped unharmed. That's the type of report that we're looking for. Details, specifics. All right? And in order to know those specifics, you have to pay attention to yourself and you have to write stuff down. Okay? Now, I don't know who your judge is going to be. Some judges like to ask all the questions and give me a chance to follow up. Other judges will have me ask the questions first and then they'll follow up. There's a difference in the way judges ask questions compared to the way I ask questions. Judges will ask you at a certain point in the hearing, when we get into your activities during the day, the judge will ask you about your abilities. I'll ask you about your limitations. The judge will ask, can you dress yourself? Or can you wash dishes? Or do you go to clubs or organizations? Do you visit with family and friends? I won't ask questions that start with can you or do you. I'll ask you questions such as, do you have any difficulty doing this or that? I ask about your difficulties, your limitations. The judges ask about abilities. Anytime you're asked can you or do you, you're asked about an ability. This isn't an ability hearing, this is a disability hearing. And when the judge asks those questions, you should be prepared to turn the question around on them and say, yes, I can do that, but. Yes, I can dress myself, but I need assistance tying my shoes. I have to lay on the bed to hike up my trousers. Sometimes my friend, neighbor, roommate, husband, spouse has to help me put on a shirt or help me with my coat. These limitations have to be brought out by you voluntarily. If you just say, yes, I can dress myself, or yes, I can brush my teeth, what happens is that I have to come back when you're done testifying and say, well, you told the judge you can brush your teeth. Do you have any difficulty brushing your teeth? You told the judge you can wash dishes. Do you have any difficulty washing dishes? And then it sounds as though I'm leading you by the nose through the hearing and your credibility suffers. You want to be prepared to volunteer that stuff when asked. So it's yes, but, and no, because. When I ask the questions, do you have any difficulty brushing your teeth? Then you would say, of course, if you do have any difficulty, yes, I can brush my teeth, but I have to stand there and lean on the counter or on the wall, or I sit down while I'm brushing my teeth because standing is very painful for me. Or whatever else it is that might interfere with you performing that particular activity. Lack of interest, lethargy if you're depressed. But you need to be prepared to explain these things. One of the things that interferes with my clients explaining these things is a bit of embarrassment, perhaps blaming yourself, wishing you weren't in the shape that you're in, thinking that talking about it is complaining. Talking about your symptoms and limitations is not complaining, it's reporting. It's what the hearing is all about. It's what you're going to the hearing to do. All right? If you go to the hearing and you don't disclose everything because you feel ashamed or embarrassed or for whatever reason, you don't want to bore anybody, what you're doing is you're not doing the job that you have gone there for. You requested a hearing. You're taking up the judge's time. I'm going there with you. You should endeavor to report things as fully and accurately as possible without concern for how you look. Okay, leave the pride at the door. Go into that hearing room and tell us how it is. Don't exaggerate things, but don't minimalize things. Most of my clients, despite what you hear on the news about people faking it, most of my clients are more apt to downplay their symptoms, downplay their limitations, right? Not tell the whole story, because they don't want to sound like they're whining and complaining. Okay? It isn't whining and complaining to report things accurately. Okay? Whining and complaining is saying, oh, it's so terrible, I can't do anything. Reporting is, I have difficulty mopping a floor. I haven't done it in a year. Standing there, moving back and forth with that motion, moving the heavy bucket is very difficult for me. Okay? That's reporting. I have difficulty taking care of my personal hygiene. I used to fix my hair a certain way. I can't hold my hands above my head. It's too much energy and too much effort for me to do these things. I shower once a week now instead of every day because of the difficulties I have doing this. I never shower unless somebody is home because I've fallen, or I need somebody to remind me to shower because my depression preoccupies me. You need to explain things as they are. This is your opportunity to have the judge try to understand what you go through from day to day. It's as though you were bringing a video camera into the hearing and showing the judge a video of what you go through during the day, only you're doing it with words. Okay? You can't bring a video into the hearing, you can't bring pictures into the hearing, but you want your testimony to be as thorough as a picture. Okay? And every picture, well, I can't show you one now, but usually paintings or photographs, they have a subject and then they have a context. You have a picture of your cousin in your kitchen laughing and there's people around. The cousin is the focus of the picture, but everything around the cousin forms the context, tells the story of that particular moment. Okay? If you just give us the subject, for example, if you just give us, yes, I can wash dishes, okay? The judge will have you standing there washing dishes for hours on end as though you have no difficulty and no limitation doing it. You have to tell us, yes, but I have to lean on the countertop while I do it. I can only stand there for 5 minutes at a time. I have to go and rest. It might take me 5 or 6 trips to the sink to get the dishes done. Now the judge is getting a clearer picture of what it is that you have to go through. And that's what the testimony is all about. Now, the hearing begins with a discussion of background information, such as how far you went in school, who you live with, what your education level is, what jobs you've had in the past. It moves on to what are the medical conditions, particularly symptoms, that are causing you to be unable to work. Right? You don't need to focus so much on getting the exact medical terminology of what's wrong with your back or your psychiatric state or your liver or whatever else is wrong. Okay? You don't need to say I have retrolisthesis in my L4, L5 spine. You do need to say I got a pain in my back. All right? And then describe that pain. It's sharp, stabbing, burning, achy, throbbing. Okay? Then, after you've described your symptoms, okay? And for example, and mental health symptoms are sometimes the hardest to describe. It's hard to describe something without feeling like you sound lazy. To say, I feel like I have lead weights on my legs. I feel like there's a blue veil over everything I look at. My mind is so fogged, I can't concentrate on things. But you've got to get that across, okay? And then it moves into the limitations, and we discussed that just now. Yes, but, no, because, if the judge is asking the questions, giving full details if I'm asking the questions, focusing on how these symptoms cause limitations, okay? We can't win the case with just a diagnosis. We can't win the case with the diagnosis and symptoms. Diagnoses or medical conditions cause symptoms, symptoms cause limitations, and limitations, if sufficient, add up to disability. So we've got to take your symptoms, pain, weakness, fatigue, distraction, lack of concentration, and we got to take that a step further and show how that limits us, okay? Lack of concentration. For example, I can't follow the plot of a movie when I watch TV. Or if I read a newspaper article, I have to read the paragraph 3 or 4 times before I understand it. I've read it every time. The problem is that I got lost while I was reading it. People are talking to me and I start out listening to them. Next thing you know, I have no idea what anybody's talking about anymore. Those types of things have to be described, okay? Not only do psychiatric symptoms cause difficulties with concentration or interpersonal relationships, pain does too. If you have a chronically painful condition, don't look at your symptoms simply as I can't lift things, I can't stand, I can't sit. Your pain distracts you. Distraction is an enormous symptom that comes from having a bad back or a chronic knee condition or a problem with your neck. If the pain keeps you from concentrating on things, that's got to come across, okay? Another type of question that gets asked at these hearings, typically by the judge, will be sort of a day in the life. Give me a narrative of what you do. All right? What do you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed? Or from 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon? The question calls for you to give a detailed answer about everything you do during the course of the day. There's some pitfalls here when you answer a question like that. I have found that my clients tend to take what might be typical activities that they would do throughout an entire week and then cram them all into one day. Well, I might go shopping, I might go visit my mother, I might sweep the kitchen floor, I might go to church, and the next thing you know, your day is so full, you're busier than the judges in a typical day. You want to make sure that you're answering the question, number one, based upon how you are on a typical day. Not a good day. There are no good days. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even 7 or 8 good days a month, that's not really relevant to these proceedings, because these proceedings are all about your ability to work 5 days a week, 23 days a month, 280 something days a year. So forget about the good days. Don't talk about what you might do on a good day. When you're asked what you do during a day, it's a typical day, an ordinary day. Right? And you have to talk about that and limit your testimony to exactly what you might do in one day. Right? So try to avoid cramming a week's worth of activities into one day when you answer that question. And also remember, just like with the yes, the can you do this and do you do that questions, you have to give the details. You can't just say, well, I get out of bed around 8:30, I'll fix myself something to eat, I might pick up the kitchen a little bit, I'll watch some TV, talk to my husband, get the kids off to school. You haven't even gotten to lunchtime and you just rattled off at least a half dozen things that you do, and you haven't talked about a single limitation. So if you have trouble getting out of bed, volunteer it. I get out of bed around 8:30. Normally I've been laying in bed for a while because I woke up in pain. I'm trying to judge the pain that I'm in. It takes me, I have to lean on the walls and the furniture as I make my way to the bathroom. Every activity that you mention in response to this question, you should be attaching the limitations, if you have any. Nobody's asking you to make anything up. But you've got to pay attention to yourself, you've got to know the limitations, and you have to have the courage to volunteer that information. Another question that's asked during the course of this hearing would be about your ability to lift, sit, stand, walk. Lifting objects is tricky. If your house was on fire and you live with somebody else, you probably would try to find a way to drag that person out. That's not what you'd be able to lift day in, day out at a job. So never answer a question about how much can you lift based upon what you can do in extraordinary circumstances or on the occasional good day that you might have. Right? Always answer those questions in the context of why you're at this hearing. And it's an important thing for you to remember. Always remember why you are at this hearing. You're at this hearing to report your limitations. You're at this hearing because you believe that you're disabled. Okay? There's no shame in you answering the questions in a way that highlights the difficulties that you're having. You haven't been dragged here as some impartial witness. You filed an application for benefits. You believe that you're disabled. Your testimony should show why you believe that. All right? It's not whining and complaining, once again, for you to advocate for yourself and to demonstrate to the judge what difficulties you're having. So when you're talking about lifting, for example, you should keep in mind a job normally requires me to lift things multiple times throughout the course of the day. Now when I ask this question, I won't ask just how much can you lift. I will give you a scenario, a circumstance in which you will do the lifting, and then you tell me how much you can lift under those circumstances. So I'll portray it this way. Pretend or assume there's an object on a table, not on the floor, so you don't have to bend to pick it up. I'm not going to tell you how much the object weighs, but I am going to tell you how much I need you to lift it. And then you're going to tell me how much it can weigh if you have to lift it that often. So it's on a table. I don't care if you sit or stand when you lift it, but you need to lift it, hold it for 20 to 30 seconds, set it down. You need to do that once an hour throughout an 8-hour day. So that's 8 times in a day with an hour break between each time. 5 days a week, 23 days a month. How much weight can you lift if you had to lift it that often? By the time you get to the hearing, you need to know an answer to that question, because I'm going to ask it. And if you don't know the answer, the judge will fill in the blank for you, and it will not be in your favor. The follow-up question to that will be, now let's say you have to lift it every 10 minutes instead of once an hour. So it's 6 times an hour, 40 to 48 times in a day. Okay? Same circumstances, it's on a table, you consider stand when you lift it. Right? Again, you have to tell us how much it can weigh if you have to lift it that often. So between now and the hearing, it might be a good idea for you to take an empty jug, a half-gallon jug or a gallon jug, fill it with water, set it on a table somewhere, and one day practice and see. Could you lift that half-gallon 8 times in a day? Could you lift that half-gallon 48 times in a day? Could you lift that gallon? Okay? There are common household items you might lift occasionally. Bags of dog food, a bag of potatoes, whatever. Have an idea of what you can lift. Be able to answer that question, because if you can't, the judge will fill in that blank for you, and more likely than not, it will not be in your favor. The judge will just ask, how long can you sit? Okay? If you sit like this most of the day because your back hurts, or like this, or leaning on a table, that's not exactly the type of sitting you can do at work. Okay? So, I'm going to ask the question this way, and this is the type of sitting I want you to be thinking about when you're testifying. How long can you sit in an upright position at a table or a desk with your hands free, prepared to do something with them, whether it's work on a keyboard, inspect a part, assemble something, answer a telephone, but you can't be doing this, okay? So you need to be prepared to answer that question. How long can you sit at one time like that? And how long can you sit total in an 8-hour span of time? So if you could do 20 minutes or 30 minutes, how many 20 or 30 minute periods of time can you do in a day? Because the judge is going to want to know both what can you do at one time and what's the total amount you can do in a day. So remember, that's the type of sitting we're talking about at this hearing. Even if the judge doesn't use those terms, we're talking about work. Remember, we're here to talk about your ability to work. Okay? The judge will ask, how long can you stand? I will ask, how long can you stand in approximately one place without leaning against something? That's normally what you have to do at work. Most employers, if you work in a mill, at a machine, or at a cash register, and you can't be leaning on stuff while you're standing there. You have to have your hands free. You have to be able to stand on your own free will. So, you need to know how long you can stand in one place without leaning against something. You need to know, again, just like with sitting, if you can do it for 15 minutes or half an hour, how many periods of time can you do in an 8-hour day? Walking, the judge will ask how far or how long you can walk. I'll ask how long or how far can you walk before you have to stop, take a break, whether you lean on something or not. Just if you're walking out to the mailbox and you have to stop halfway there because it's hurting you, or you're getting out of breath because you have asthma or something. You got to tell us how far you can do that, how long you can do that. All right, what's the total amount of time you could possibly spend walking in a day? Always remember why you're at this hearing, all of your questions, even if you think they're unrelated to work. Like, what the heck's it got to do with work if I can read a newspaper or not? Well, it has something to do with your credibility. On your application for benefits, you indicated that you had significant limitations in your ordinary daily activities. So when the judge asks these questions, they're trying to figure out what you can do in a work environment, but they're also trying to figure out if you're credible. When a person loses a disability hearing, in every case where a person loses a disability hearing, The judge says, I find that the claimant has medical conditions that are capable of causing some of the symptoms that they complain of, but they are not fully credible with regard to the extent of their symptoms and limitations. And then they go into this litany about, they said they have these extraordinary limitations in their daily activities, but they can dress themselves, they can take care of their personal hygiene, they can watch television, read a newspaper, drive a car, converse with family and friends. And you read that and you say, well, give me a job doing all that and I'll be great. Okay? The purpose is they're trying to attack your credibility. They're going out of their way to show inconsistencies in the things you say, whether they have anything to do with disability or not. So you have to be prepared to, no matter how stupid or insignificant a question may seem, to talk about limitations that you have, if you have them. I'm not asking you to make anything up, but if you have limitations, make sure that they're coming out in your testimony. Make sure the judge is getting in a very detailed and complete picture of the limitations that you have. And again, for the people whose disabilities involve some degree of mental health issues, those are harder. When a judge asks you how long can you sit, you might be inclined to say, I could sit all day if I had the energy. Well, that's just the point. If you spend a good portion of your day laying down or sitting with your feet up on the couch, not in an upright position, either depressed or preoccupied with your thoughts or unable to concentrate on things, that impacts your ability to sit, that impacts your ability to stand, it impacts your ability to walk. You need to be able to say, my ability to sit is severely restricted by the fact that I need to lay down or recline or rest, I don't know, whatever number of hours a day it is for you, whether it's 12, 15, 20, it's a 24-hour day we're dealing with. So you need to be able to explain that that's impairing your limitations. It's not too much easier, but it is a little bit easier to explain things when your disabilities are mostly physical. After the hearing is concluded, we will not know if you won or lost. We won't know probably for weeks, if not months, after the hearing. Some judges will take 2 weeks to issue a decision. Some judges will take 3 or 4 months. There's no way for me to control how long that takes. And there's probably going to be no way for me to tell you whether or not you won at the conclusion of the hearing, or even what my gut instincts are. Judges are very good at keeping their hands close to their chest and not disclosing where they're going with a particular case. I can assure you that if we did the hearing, I thought your case was pretty strong. It was worth going through with the hearing. If I didn't think your case was strong enough to go through with the hearing, I would have advised you to withdraw the hearing request and start with a new application where we can get better evidence. But the fact that I think your case is strong is not an indication of what the judge believes or where the case is going to end up. Right? And when the case is concluded and you get a decision in the mail, we can discuss where we go from there. If it's a favorable decision, everybody's happy. If it's an unfavorable decision, there are options. There's appeals to be taken, there's new applications that could be filed, and we will have a discussion at that time as to what it is we should do. In the meantime, your focus should be on paying attention to yourself every day and how your symptoms impact everything you say and do, your interactions with people, your lack of interactions with people, your inability to do common, ordinary things that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would have found no problem at all doing. Taking those notes, paying attention to those things, and being prepared to give us details at this hearing. And remember, yes, but, no because. Avoid vague expressions like sometimes and not much. And provide us with as much detail as you possibly can when you're answering a question. Took a break, reviewed my recording, realized there was a couple of things I left out. So I want to cover those with you because I want to make sure they're not forgotten. When you go to the hearing, you don't need to get dressed up like you're going to some sort of job interview. Don't go wear your best clothing. Don't dress inappropriately either. But wear clothes that you're comfortable in, as long as they're not torn, as long as they're not dirty, as long as they don't leave any or too much skin exposed, you should be fine. Don't go fixing your hair up or wearing a lot of makeup as though you're going to church or some big get-together. You want to go to the judge. Again, your testimony isn't the words you say. Your testimony is your demeanor and your appearance as well. So you want your appearance to be consistent with how you typically feel and how you typically appear. I mean, you can't wear your pajamas to the hearing, but you don't want to be all dressed up as though you're, as I said, going to a job interview or going to some family get-together or something. You want to dress ordinarily and comfortably. You also have to remember that at the hearing, the questions are pretty important. Your job, as I said, is to report information. It's not necessarily to answer questions, but you do need to concentrate on the questions while they're being asked. Most people I know have a tendency to anticipate where a question is going, or when somebody's talking, anticipating what they're going to say. When I do that, I know that what happens is I start listening, then I start thinking about what I'm going to say when that person is finished talking. And when I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, I'm only half listening to what they're saying at that point. You want to give the question, whether it's from me or the judge, 100% of your attention. If you are anticipating where the question is going, you are distracted. You need to avoid that, and if you do it, if you can't resist it, which is a natural impulse, if you can't resist anticipating, then you need to ask us to repeat the question or to reword the question. You have to tell us that you were distracted, even if you were distracted by your own thoughts. Typically, for people who are disabled, distraction is a big part of their lives. It's not going to be an insult to the judge for you to tell them that you were distracted. So you must tell us if you were thinking while the question is being asked. You must tell us that you were distracted and ask us to repeat the question. You also need to make sure that every part of that question is completely understandable to you. I know when I'm in a conversation with somebody, people don't always choose words the way I would. But if I kind of think I know what they mean, I'll keep the conversation going. There's no kind of think you know at this hearing. You either understand the question and every word in the question completely, or you don't understand it and you ask us to repeat the question or to rephrase the question. It's also all right for you not to know the answer to a question. If you don't know, you don't know. Do not answer questions if you do not know the answer to them. Do not guess at answers, but you can make estimates. If you know from your experience approximately what the answer to a question can be, then give us that approximation. But don't answer questions you don't know the answer to. You do need to know the answers to certain questions. So you do need to know by the time of the hearing how much you can lift with the frequency I discussed before, how long you can sit in the position that I described before, and how long you can stand or walk in the manner that I discussed previously in this recording. If you keep those things in mind, if you stay focused on the questions, if you remember to volunteer your limitations, you'll be fine. But remember, don't anticipate what needs to be said at this hearing. Answer the questions we ask of you. Give us as much detail as you can, but don't go in there off on some tangent telling a story that you think needs to be told. You do need to focus on the questions, and you do need to answer the questions. I will see you at the hearing. I'm sure you'll do fine. Watch this video a couple of times because there's a lot of information in it, and you need to try to be comfortable with the information I'm giving you. But it is very simple. Pay attention to yourself, take notes, remember to volunteer your limitations, and focus and pay attention to the questions. You'll be fine, and I'll be there with you. See you soon.